Good morning, afternoon, and night, wherever you are. Welcome to session 4 of Developer Talks, Ingenious Ways to Work Smarter, Faster, and Healthier. This week's theme is going to be a little bit centered on working individually or as freelancers. If you've got a lot of clients, or if you're doing anything where you're the only person on the project. With me here is Bebo, and he'll be taking you through our Discord channel and our schedule.
Well, hello. Welcome again. It's great to be here for the 4th time. So
Great.
Let's get started with some quick housekeeping items again. If you haven't already join us on discord.gg/web. And we have an entire category dedicated to the web Devign Talks. And so if you would like, join us in the live discussion channel. The URL is right there below, floating right below my chin. And if you can join us, it would be great. If you do join us, you'll be entered automatically to win the chance for Reddit Premium and Discord Nitro. And so we'll be choosing several winners for each of those throughout the conference. In the live discussion channel, you'll have the opportunity to discuss the talks with other listeners. And then I'll also be monitoring that channel and grabbing out questions for our speakers, because at the end of each of those talks, we'll have a quick question and answer session with the speakers. And so I just also want to remind you that this is the 4th session, but we have 2 more. So we have some additional speakers lined up for December 20th and 27th. If you visit redditweb.dev/schedule, you can learn more about who is speaking and what they're talking about, and be sure to add those talks to your calendar. So I'll hand it back to Ron so that he can introduce our first speaker for today.
Thank you, Bebo. Well, our first talk today is titled Enforcing Constraints as a Solo Dev. And often we think of constraints as a bad thing, but once you remove yourself from the normal environment of working on a team, you have a whole different kettle of fish, and constraints can be a good thing. And with us today to explain that is Kushan Joshi, a front-end engineer at Square. Welcome, Kushan.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
No, it's wonderful to have you here to give us a different perspective. Tell us a bit about your experience with working as a solo dev.
Yeah, so I have a full-time job, and for the past 2-3 years, I've been working on a side project where it's just me alone, working, staring at the screen, and trying to build something. So during this journey, on the past 2-3 years, I realized that a lot of things that I take for granted during my work, like having an engineering manager, a product manager, a lot of customers, and having these smart people, they're not really here when I'm working alone on this side project. So that's what got me to think about all the constraints that make me more productive working solo. Yeah.
100%. We've all been there before, where you don't have someone else to give you that discipline to poke you along. You know, if you're the only person asking yourself where this is at or where that's at, it's an entirely different realm. So
I'm sure the client will help out in that regard.
Yeah, I hope it's not too late by the time client is like, hey, this is missing.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Kushan, over the next 15 minutes, we welcome you to enlighten us on the constraints of working as a solo dev. Thank you.
All right. Hey, everyone. This is Kushan, and I'm going to be talking about enforcing constraints as a solo developer. A little bit of introduction about myself. So I am Kushan Joshi, and I am a front-end developer for the past 4 or 5 years. And in a couple of years, I started working on a side project, which is a note-taking app on the right-hand side, to see what I can get done working alone as an open source software. During this journey, I realized that there are a lot of things that I take for granted in a regular place, but are not really applicable when working alone. So why do constraints matter more when you're working as a solo developer? So the first thing is that we are humans and we are social animals. We automatically look at each other, look at each other's facial expressions, and to see how the room is doing, how we are doing. And when you're working alone, these things are not there. You do not have this really awesome work buddy who can tell you, hey, you're doing great. Hey, that was missing. So there's no one really out there to help you when you're working alone. I mean, and there's no one to even validate your ideas. For example, you think that showing 3D graphics on your project is a good idea or a bad idea, but there's no one out there or a smart person out there to tell you, hey, maybe it wouldn't work for XYZ devices. And you're missing a lot of things out there when you're working alone. So enforcing certain constraints would help you really shine when you're working alone and meet deadlines or meet goals or impress your clients better. So um, I'm going to talk about what worked for me in this project that I've been working on for the past 3 years. And after that, I'll be talking about what doesn't work. So first thing is that you have very limited resources when you're working alone. So you can sort of spread out in time to see what you can get out of there. And you can see that you have your past self, you have your present self, and you have your future self. So I found that using my future self as my coding buddy is really powerful. So one of the things that I would do is create a pull request and let it sit there for a day or two. What really happens here is that I'm leveraging the fact that my future self would be a little bit dissociated with the code I wrote and would be able to provide a much better code feedback than I would right now because I have my own biases and I just wrote this code. So I wouldn't be seeing the office. So I highly recommend that if you're working with GitHub or whatever version management you use, you do not commit the code directly to the feature or main branch, and you let it sit there and let your future self come there after 2-3 weeks, if not like 2-3 days, and give you a solid feedback. And that really works. And the other thing that I found is maintaining a daily log. When you're working alone, it's very easy to skip on things, which when you're working with 4 or 5 people, as I told you, we are humans and we look at each other. If everyone is writing a daily stand-up or a daily log, we would be doing that too. But when you're working alone, you do not have those limitations. So you have to put these artificial constraints. And for me, it was having a daily log. You don't need to go fancy and get a lot of fancy tools. You can just have a simple plain note file and just write the date and just dump out what all you did that day. And you don't need to worry about the quality because you have a lot of things to do. You're wearing a lot of hats. So the most important thing here is quantity, not quality. Just dump out everything you did. And trust me, when you're working on this project that you're working alone, after a while, you'll be seeing progress. You'll be reading your daily logs and you'll be planning out what you did and what you couldn't do. So next thing is never skip on documentation when working alone. This is again very easy to skip. I have even skipped this part when working with a huge team and huge budget. But when working on this project, I realized that after 4 or 5 months, I really have limited understanding of this piece of code that I wrote couple of while ago, and I do not have the time to go and read the code. So having a really awesome documentation about the API, because all I care about at that time is the API that this piece of code provides. And if I can just read the documentation, I can get productive and start using my own code. That's one of the benefits when you use a third-party library, which is well documented. And you can go and read the code, or you can just read the documentation. And majority of the developers just go and read the documentation and get things done. So with your own code that you plan to use and reuse, having documentation telling you all the gotchas or just giving you a little example of how to use an API is really helpful. The other thing is, it might be a little contentious, but planning sprints. This is something that I started doing last year because I was really missing out on progress and like missing some sort of rigidity. So I started doing sprints with my own self. A sprint is something like a week or two where you decide things you want to get done. And at the end of the sprint, you check how much were you able to do. And working on as a solo developer, just planning out a very limited sprint, it doesn't need to be ambitious. It's really helpful to, see where you're going at and if you're actually making progress or you're just stuck in a rabbit hole and you're not getting out. So having a sprint and having these weeks, for example, I would say, what did I get done in week 52? And I would have a log for that and see what I got accomplished in that time. Um, while we're talking about software planning and project management, task curation is very important because you do not have a dedicated product manager and all these awesome people when working alone. So spending out time to curate a task, especially the one that you think are going to be impactful, is very helpful. For example, when you're planning a sprint, you would want to have tasks. So it doesn't need to be fancy because, again, you're working alone and you have a lot of constraints already. So it can just be a simple GitHub issue. You don't need to spend time in Jira and other fancy software management things. Just having these tasks and having a set idea of how big the task is very important. Also, while we're talking about tasks, having an evergreen list of easy to pick tasks was super helpful for me. As I said, like working alone is also a psychological game because a lot of anxiety and other things kick in, and you have a real life. You might have another job, you might have other obligations. So you will not be feeling 100% every time working on this project of yours. So having a small and very easy to pick up task list is very important. It could be just a simple fixing that CSS bug, a clear guideline on what you need to do, and having that list doesn't need to be actionable. Just having that list is very important so that when you're having that bad day or when you're having no motivation, just picking up that simple task and getting that done would get your cognitive wheel spinning, and you'll start getting ideas and you'll start getting that motivation. And I feel this was very important for me while working on this project, or it could have been one more dead project that I never picked up on. So very helpful. The other thing is, talking about a little bit of the code side, having a mono repository is very helpful. In my previous projects, I ended up with a lot of, as people call it, big ball of mud, with having dependencies, crisscrossing, and not really knowing what exactly is happening here. So people like to call it big ball of mud, and it's very fragile, and you do not know if you touch this piece of code what all would break, and most of the times it just breaks, and you end up losing motivation to work on the project. So having this little sort of scheme of having smaller packages, as we call them npm packages, is really helpful because it artificially forces you to build something within the scope of that package. And from there, you can just read the package's documentation and use it other places. And that way, you have these bigger granular pieces of chunks to work with. And that helps avoid this famous big ball of mud. The other thing is that when you're working alone, you do not have a lot of bandwidth. So investing little time and getting a lot of benefit from it is really powerful. And there are these tools that really shine out, which are very low effort and give you a lot for your time invested in them. And for one of them is like Yarn, especially Yarn 2, which helps you set up the mono repository, and it has PNP, which is plug and play, where you do not have to spend time in figuring out how to set up the workspace and how to run the test. It does it for you. The other one I strongly recommend is Netlify. Netlify is sort of like GitHub Pages, but on steroids. It is simple and it gets the job done. You do not have to tweak with fancy configurations, and most of the time it gets the job done with little efforts. Similarly, Jest and Tailwind are like sort of becoming the default for just getting started on the front end. And if you need more complexity for your styling and CSS framework, you can always go with more complicated and more opinionated ones. But just starting off, go with the easy ones, simple ones, which give you a lot of oomph for your time invested. And another thing that really works is to defer things. It is okay to defer. It is okay to skip on the fancy feature and skip on that refactor and just ship something rather than nothing. So differing things, you might just end up like, oh, I want to also get this done, I want to get that done, and you have a huge list and you do not end up shipping anything. So try to focus on shipping something smaller than actually doing the whole re-architecture that you imagine. Really helps when working as a solo developer. Avoid the part where you want to, scope in everything in a small thing, small sprint. Yeah. Okay. So those are the things that we should do. And let's talk about what are the things to avoid when you're working as a solo developer. Avoid fancy tools. One thing that I really liked is that I deferred TypeScript for my project initially, early on. And it depends on your project. So if your project thinks that TypeScript is very important, I would say go for it. But for certain projects, especially in my case, TypeScript was slowing me down and it would prevent me from reiterating or prototyping faster. But as your project slowly matures and you have more power and you know where you're heading, you can always add TypeScript later on. So avoiding fancy tools is very helpful. Go for the simple ones because it's just only you who is going to be going through all of that. Similarly, tools that work for big companies and big budgets do not work for you. This could be a fancy state management, immutable JS is one of them, server-side rendering is one of them. Just question yourself, like, do I really want this? And also, do I really have time to invest in this? Or can I just get something done with simple? Like, be willing to compromise. You might be surprised that you do not need server-side readiness rendering, or you do not need the fancy lighthouse metrics all the time. You can just get away with something slower, but something that works and helps you achieve your features. And the other one is spending too much time on using the latest and greatest. This is another of the devils when working solo. You end up seeing this fancy new tool that just launched and everyone is going gaga about it. And you think, hey, maybe I should just rewrite my whole thing and use that. That's a trap. And that would not really scale well in the long run. So I would recommend avoiding the latest and greatest as long as you can while focusing on things that you already know and are familiar with. Conclusion. Yeah, working alone is hard. It's a difficult journey. So you need to be practical with the timelines and with your own limitations. You only have two hands, and you'll be wearing a lot of hats. So really be practical with the timelines. Do not be aggressive, and do not think you can wing it alone because there's no one to do a sanity check. So always be a little laxed, and it's okay to have relaxed timelines because you're only working. And the other one is try not to compete with the big players. For example, if your side project you hope that it would be giving you some monetary benefits in the future, it might have any potential. Try not to compete early on with the big players because that's going to drain you out. And working solo should bring you joy and comfort. Like, there are a lot of benefits of working solo. You do not have to worry about what other people are thinking. You don't have to worry about a lot of the social aspects. So take the positive side of it and make sure you find joy and comfort while you're working on it and not get stressed out. Yeah. So that was all from my side. I would like to thank everyone for listening. Yeah.
Thank you, Kushan. I think one thing that really stood out to me was the fact that when you're working alone, you don't have someone to invalidate your bad ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot of times. You want this really feature, and not everyone works the same way you do, and there's no one going to tell you, hey, that fancy 3D art that you're thinking would work. That happened to me. It's not gonna work, and not everyone is going to like it. Yeah.
But you feel so smart and fancy when you do it, hey?
Yeah, that's the thing. You really like it, but 90% of people out there would not be interested in that, and they would want something simpler.
Absolutely. We do have some questions if you're happy to field a few.
Sure.
One of
Do
them
I look at the
I'll get Bebo to read a few.
It's my job. Don't take it away from me. This is what I get paid for. No.
He's the best at it.
Well, it's a little slower today, but we do have a couple of questions for you, particularly around your daily log. And so, like I said, I have several questions. We'll start with, why do you think that the daily log works for you?
Yeah. So, for example, if you do not have a daily log, you are working on your project every day, and week after from now, you'll be wondering, what did I really achieve last week? Or if you're out on a vacation and you come back and you want to get the context, what was I really working on? What was that important thing? You might think that it might just click to you, but I feel like having something written down and just dumping, like sort of git commit when you're having in the stage area is really helpful for your mind too. Just dumping down everything what you wrote. And when you come back, you can just reabsorb all of that, see where you are, and you get your mind focused in the same direction as you're working the day before. Yeah.
Another question here is, well, we're getting several questions now, so let me read through those real quickly. Ron just posted one regarding avoiding the latest and greatest. How do you judge when something is too fancy for your project or actually a good idea?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think there's no silver bullet out there. Sometimes it's a risk, to be honest with you. Sometimes the latest and greatest might be actually helpful, but are you willing to take that risk? And are you going to be like, oh, I would be okay if I miss on it and I can add it later on? For example, you're good at, let's say, Redux, and some fancy state management library comes out, and you're debating whether I should try it. If it's a fun side project, sure. But if you're having a long-term plan for this, I would suggest go with your strong aces. Like you're familiar with Redux, you're familiar with React, go for it and skip on. Take that risk. Do not take that risk. Yeah.
Quick question. Well, I guess I'm going to take a question and turn it into my own question. So you gave us a list full of tips that you like to employ. Can you use an example of a solo project that you've been on and how following either one of those tips or multiple of those tips led to success?
I can give the project that I'm working on, which is Bangle.io. And the success for me is that I was able to open source it. The number one thing that I used was daily logging and having every day logging what I'm doing and sprint planning for that. So I was able to extract the entire library for the editing aspect of this project a year ago. And that was thanks to the planning that I did. Every day I was thinking, like, how can I make it better? And then during that time, I realized that if I open source just the editing part of this project, it would help me catch bugs and would help me design a better product that I'm imagining, which is a note-taking tool. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, and it looks like Ron was all over it and has Bangle.io up on the stream for anyone to jump in on. Ron, are we good on time? We have time for another question?
We've got time for one more question. Yeah. Oh, here's a good one. Danilo asks, how do you decide which features you implement and when you're by yourself? How do you decide what to implement?
Right. Again, this is very subjective, and it's very hard to play the product manager hat. But I would say just write down all the features. Something that you really fancy, that you really wanted. Maybe after a week from now, you might have second thoughts about it. So give yourself some time and leverage the your future self to tell you that, because as with time you start, like how everyone finds their code not good after a year or two. Similarly, if you think some features are great or some are not, give it time, let it soak in, think about it. A week from now, you'll get a better idea.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you, Kushan. Where can folks find you besides Bangle.io?
My Twitter, which is Kushan2020. Just write down in the chat.
There he is. So
Thank you very much.
Did you run for president in 2020?
No, it was back in 2005, and just thought it would be too far away that it would be a year, and here we are.
You were forward thinking.
Surely Twitter will be replaced by 2020.
Yeah.
All right.
Kushan, thank you once again for taking us through working through as a solo dev. Anyone who missed it can catch it again at the end of this. The recording will be up. His Twitter is there, and if you want to follow him on LinkedIn as well, his LinkedIn is linkedin.com/in/Kushan-Joshi. Thank you, Kushan. We'll catch you around. Thank you.
All right. Well, between takes, do you want to plug our Twitter?
Absolutely. So this is new for us as well. So we've been plugging everyone's Twitter. Ours is twitter.com/redditweb. We have a grand total of, let me find out now. /redditweb.
Is that an overflow?
No. We have 7 followers, but the greatest things are still to come. We've been online for a month. We will be posting more of our Reddit and Discord community events there. Currently, we have we've been doing web jams. We've had a Discord stages chat, and we're also all taking part in a private leaderboard for Advent of Code. So if you're interested in more stuff we're doing, beyond and with the community, make sure you follow it, twitter.com/redditweb.
Wonderful. Great plug, off the cuff and everything.
Absolutely.
Very good job. All right, well, I'll take the reins here and introduce our next speaker. Throw her up on the board there. I'm personally excited for this talk because I think that it's just going to be full of wonderful advice that's applicable for everyone out there. And so Caroline Leopold is going to be chatting with us about tips to avoid disasters with design naive clients. And she'll be highlighting some ways to prevent those disasters and manage expectations and make sure that the workflow works for you. So let's get Caroline up here. Hi, Caroline.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. I was excited when I went on WebDev and saw the call. I didn't expect to be chosen. I thought that 1,000 people would apply, but I went for it.
I said, I just personally have this desire to introduce a little bit of non-tech to the tech people. And so, I mean, we could have talks for days about React and JavaScript and, the newest framework, et cetera. But I think some of these soft skills are just incredibly valuable, especially for our general audience, new developers who are either looking to freelance or join a job for the first time, and the need to manage clients is going to be a part of their job. And I think that if I have 2 developers that I'm choosing from, and one is a little bit weaker on the development side, but they have this ability to manage expectations and communicate effectively with clients, I'm going to pick the weaker developer with the stronger communication skills every time.
I'm trying to get my lighting better.
Really?
Yeah, no problem.
I'm sitting next to a window. This is the very first time I've ever done any video in my office. I've been always in these staged areas in my living room, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of pretending that picture behind me is a real picture. So
Well, another thing you're probably sick of hearing is that it's the new normal, but it's true. It is what we're used to. So it's nice seeing a little bit of a snippet on there. It's more interesting than my little wardrobe of mirrors and a closed door. So
I
nice.
Closed my blind for light management between the first speaker and now. So Yep, we're all experimenting for sure.
Yeah, this will work. All right.
So Carolyn, do you need some help with the presentation?
Yeah, when I practiced it on Saturday, I uploaded the slides. But the OAuth I used was my business account. I tried to log in my personal, and so I can't access my slides. I have them on my desktop. I have the link. I just, I didn't do it the right way this time.
Yeah, sure. Did you want to speak off the cuff, or would you be able to give us access? We could share it for you.
I put the link in chat.
Oh,
Sorry about that, everybody.
the cloud strikes again.
100%.
And I know I could transfer, do all this stuff with Google. I just didn't. I'm actually very nervous, so my hands are shaking. So it's
Oh yeah, that's fine.
do computer stuff. Look, it's
Yeah. Would you have access to your business email to give access? I think it may not be public at the moment.
Well, I had the presentation on my, I have it right now. I can share my screen. But
Yeah. That's
share your screen.
I'm not on it, right? Can you do a split screen?
You can share your screen, and then we have special magic so that you can see your face.
We'll take care of that for you.
Yep.
Perfect.
So just go ahead and share your screen.
Okay.
That'll be lovely.
Oh wait. Okay. Of course, I'm working with one monitor. Sorry, guys. I know this shit happens all the time. Select window screen. Oh, good God. StreamYard? Am I sharing it?
Oh, looky there.
We see it there.
You know
That's
what?
all right.
I'm going to do the talk without slides. I just don't have.
Oh no, that's all right. That's great, Carolyn. If you just bring up your slides, yeah.
I spent all weekend on these slides, and anybody who's a designer will understand. I was so worked up about the font and the color and the opacity. I spent more time on the freaking PowerPoint than I did on my presentation. But I'm a pretty.
We have to see it now.
There you go.
I can see it. Yeah. If you could just make that
full
screen, Carolyn.
It's very pretty. I use colors that are not used in natural technical environments like rose,
Yeah, go ahead and switch to your slides on your screen, and we'll throw it up there.
All right, I'm on the slideshow now.
Oh, I'm liking it already.
Do you see it?
We see it.
It's
yes.
coming.
Thank you. Okay, I have to go to the front.
Once you speak to you don't need to see our ugly mutts. So
here's a spoiler alert, everybody. I have Discord open, so we're all there. Just a little bit about me. I was an in-house writer, and I moved freelance in 2012. So I've been doing this for 10 years, and I've done all sorts of stuff. I think I'm most known as a writer. If you click through to my LinkedIn, you will see that I basically am a medical writer and grant writer. Keep in mind that LinkedIn is very businessy and it's very corporate. So that's my corporate profile. But as a person, I also do marketing and design, and I've been learning web design. I've been teaching myself via Reddit, Stack Overflow, and CSS tricks for the last 8 years. So I do have some experience. And just to let you, I'm a creative. In the work world, there's a lot of creative managers, and in my entire career, I've been doing this sort of writing work for 20 years, and I've never been a manager. I've always been a creative. I've been very stubborn and recalcitrant about never being a manager. As a result, I've been shaped in that sort of way. However, I work primarily alone, just like the previous presentation. I mostly work alone, but I work in teams of managers, directors, CEOs, marketing companies, SEOs, design specialists, you name it. I work with those teams. So I've learned to be I've learned to speak in many different languages. But the language I'm speaking right now is my language as a creative and as a peer. So I'm not going to say things like actionable or, you know, I mean, those words might weaken. I just wrote, Clients from Hell was very influential for me for several years. So I wrote my own Client for Hell. The funny thing about this story is this story isn't a client from hell at all. This is a normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill client, very average. And they're just, I work with people who, what they do is they assign the work and then they go about their lives and forget that I ever exist. And when they get the work, there's like a little bit of a scramble. I also work, you know, through third parties like marketing. I work a lot with agencies, and there's just this whole bureaucratic stuff. So a lot of times that I don't have control of the workflow. Like I control the work, but then once I hand it off to somebody, it gets lost in the ether.
Yeah.
And basically, yeah, I'm sorry, please jump in.
Yeah, no, what I was just about to say, it sounds like you're exactly the right person we want to speak on this. So can I just click in that window and just hit the refresh button if you're able to, or Control F5.
I have a Mac, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right. Command F5, my apologies.
I don't think it's going to work because, you know, Mac.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen and can be used to control
technology these days.
Voice
let's close that.
Design naive clients. Google Slides frame. To enable screen reader support, press Command + Option + Z to learn about keyboard shortcuts. Press Command / VoiceOver off.
We're gonna have the talk narrated by
it says you are sharing Firefox. Is that
okay? Yeah, no, that's perfect. Do you see on that screen of the presentation where it says loading?
Well, I think what happened, Ron, is that she's maximized the presentation and it's still sharing Firefox. So she needs to unshare the screen. Don't maximize it or unshare the screen and share the whole screen.
Oh, there I am. Okay. Oh God, I knew this was going to happen. Anytime I do anything, this always happens. And one of the things I've done a lot of improv comedy, and improv actually changed my life. And one of the things is there's no accidents, there's no mistakes, there's no errors. This is part of the fun. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and in fact, they made us do exercises where like you'd go, oh shit, you know, to basically like calm down from like some sort of problem. So anyway, Ron, you had a question?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, if you just try sharing that again and refreshing it, I've been told that the shortcut is Command-Shift-R to refresh that page.
Like I said, I think that it was because she shared it in full screen, and so it wasn't showing the presentation anymore.
Of course. Right.
Command-Shift-R, so just normal refresh with.
Yeah, where it says it's loading.
And I think that our audience appreciates the improv comedy, and they would like for us to switch to that. So
exactly, like we're pivoting. This is no longer developer productivity tips. It's just stand up.
I was invited to speak at a medical conference, and it was like super pharma, super corporate, and I just like threw my notes out and talked about improv comedy, and I thought it was brilliant, and I thought it was fun, and guess what? It fell completely flat. But the lesson I took away from that is I want to work more with creatives and less with corporate. So that actually was the turning point in my freelance career. So
pretty sweet.
Yeah,
that's a good story.
Oh yeah, I've got a ton of stories, but I also see, I know chat. Do you call Discord chat?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was a Twitch streamer for a while, and I know his chat. And it's really exciting to see Strager on because I loved his presentation, and like I'm learning, JavaScript. So I was like, oh, I got to get all these tools. And when he said that he wrote the tools, that was like, that brought down the house. I just thought that it was so cool.
Yeah. So is that presentation loading now? We got to see someone got to see the first slide. That was exciting.
Can we dump the presentation just to keep with the three of us?
Absolutely.
Because I wanted this to be interactive anyway, and the PowerPoint, who cares about it? I did have some pretty slides, but if you want to see the pretty slides, email me and I'll get them to you guys.
Absolutely. We'll let people do that. Oh, it was just so exciting because we saw the first slide say "F you, pay me."
I'm allowed to curse on this. Or is this like a children?
There is a $25 fee to your speaker fee every time you curse. So
Okay.
That's
it's
right.
up to you. No, just joking.
All right. I got to ask chat this. Do you guys know about Mike Montero and the F you, pay me
Yeah,
talk? Or are you guys like too young? You weren't even born then.
I think it's pretty popular. It's a common repost on the community.
Well,
Every few months.
the talk came out. He did the talk in 2010 or 2011. I freelanced in 2012, so I saw that talk right away. And I've seen the talk twice. Once when I started as a freelancer, and once when I got into a client from hell situation, and it changed my life. And I don't want to I don't want to spoil the end, but basically, you're going to get in this workflow, and you have. I think there's two things. As an early freelancer, you don't know the workflow. You're making up as you go. You're scared to death. You barely know what you basically are getting hired to do something that you may have done once or twice before, and you're terrified. And the main tip I have for you is extend your timeline. When you're doing your contract, which you will always be doing a contract, is in your scope of work. Let's say there's something you can do, and you can do normally in 4 days. But you're freelancing for the first time. What you should do is extend that 4 days to 4 weeks if you possibly can do that. Because every day will be a week in your life, because client communication is going to be very confusing. And you just want to do things longer. And when you're an experienced freelancer, you still shoot for the 4-week timeline, so that the client doesn't think that just because you did it in 4 days, it was super easy and super cheap, and that they can abuse you. And unfortunately, if you work with agencies, they don't care. They're going to tell you it's due in 3 days, and you say, basically what I say is, can you give me 6 days? And they say, well, we can give you 4 days, and that's what I get. And you know, one of the things about getting in the process is something you all know about is called validating the client. And a lot of the blog posts spend a lot of time, and Reddit does this too, is talks a lot about the client, the psychology of the client, you know, what's a bad client, what's a good client, and so on and so forth. That's all great, but what's actually, in my experience, more important is what are your values? I do not, with every client engagement I have, like vetting a client, I think about what are my values. And actually, I was kind of, you know, you have to think about this. And one of the easiest value that comes to my first is pay. I want to be paid well. That's an important value. But I'm gonna say something controversial, and it's just my opinion. But pay is not enough. Okay. For me personally, I need money, pay, but I need something else. And for me personally, these are my values. And think about, actually, I was gonna think about your values too. For me, it's pay, it's pride, that I'm doing something I'm proud of, and I can put in my portfolio to get more work. So I guess it also relates to money, pay, pride, and learning. I'm addicted to learning, and I want to learn every moment of my life. Because life is short, and I want to learn new things. And those are the 3 things that are my main values. And I actually used to have 4 values, and it may sound a little depressing, but my 4th value was people. When I started freelancing, I had this idea that I was going to be collegial friends with my clients, that we would know each other and learn from each other and laugh together and blah, blah, blah. And they, you know, and we'd talk, they'd know my life, and I know their life. And because I work in in agency environments, creative agency environments, and corporate environments, I have met some amazing people, but one out of all the hundreds of people I've worked with, only one ever became my friend. So now I drop the people, and I only value developing relationships with other creatives. So I hire other people, people hire me, and we work together as in our own informal teams. So those are my values, but yours may be completely different, and that is perfectly fine. But that's all that matters. And if you're talking to the client, you think they can't meet those values, move along. Oh, I'm so busy. Oh, I got this existing client. Oh, can't do it. Oh, I'm traveling the world for this, made up conference. Oh, COVID. I just, I got things with COVID, so I gotta, whatever you can, just get out. But
did you travel for this conference?
Yeah. Oh God. You know what? I'll be really honest, because I also know that we always are very shy on the internet. Like, God forbid if I say something honest on the internet. I had a prospective client request. They wanted to talk to me today. And I actually said, I'm sorry, I'm really busy with this online conference all week. So I did lie. I did lie. By the way, he's a great guy. I like him a lot. But he had this idea that his life was an emergency. And he emailed me on a Saturday saying, let's talk right now. And I have a boundary that I set a while ago, not at the beginning, where I only work X hours, because my personal value is I value my health and my happiness and my sanity. Mm-hmm. And my boyfriend, I swear, would break up with me if I started doing all this workaholic stuff, because he went through that with me. And let's face it, if you work yourself to death, I got sick. I got very sick. So that's like an important thing. And it's funny, I'll have to look at my slides to even know where I am now.
I was going to say that client you were telling us about, are you sure he's not watching now?
This is a thing with freelancers. We're always really protective. Like we don't want to I didn't sign an NDA. And also, if information is public on the internet, you can talk about it. Like my client, which I'm not going to name only because, possibly his name, Google. No, he won't. He's a wonderful nonprofit leader, top of this massive disease nonprofit, really good guy. But he knows that I'm tough, so he wouldn't be offended. And enforcing those boundaries took a long time. One thing about boundaries, you guys will write your contract, and this may come up in chat. You'll write your contract. You have this ironclad contract. It's not ironclad at all. You set these boundaries and these ground rules, and as soon as a client violates those boundaries, there is still no problem. You can just accept what the client wants, but enforcing boundary is not just a work skill, it's a life skill. Because your mother will call you and demand your time.
Quote of the day.
Your dog will expect to be fed at 4 a.m. This is life. And I know it hurts and it's scary to enforce boundaries, but it is how grown-ups work. It's part of the professional life. And Vivo, I'm sure, and Ron can tell you that they have to say no to people sometimes,
Absolutely. Sorry, I mean, no.
It's my job.
Oh, I got to read this. Traeger said, I love this conversation format. The slides are for the week.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
Well, was this the reply? You said you were busy with it, so you made the first slide. And this whole not getting him up is just a ploy to get us to speak with you during the chat, is it?
Yes, it absolutely was, because I was so I've been watching the videos on YouTube, and I was so enamored with your breezy questions, your on-air personalities. I wanted to be like I was being interviewed on a podcast or something. Yeah.
How does that make you feel, Bieber? Like, Caroline is appreciating it so much. She wants us to take up more screen time than the speakers.
Well, you know how I parsed that information and just assumed that she was talking about you. So,
okay. Takes two.
Yes.
It takes three to tango, in fact.
Yes, and I also want to bring chat in. Yes, and I want to acknowledge that chat is here. These are human beings with great ideas, many better than mine. So I did have a slide. Wait, let me look at this slide where I actually talk about some like real like concrete tips.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
talking about like client responsibilities that you describe kind of in your contracts.
Yeah. All right.
Because that's kind of a form of a constraint too, right? So a boundary. You're like, hey, like I need you to do some work, right?
Yeah, and this is something actually I learned from Reddit subreddit. So I did adopt this thing where you set a milestone where I'm going to furnish you this draft or something. I'll share this screen with you, and then when you get back to me, I will do the next thing. And that's really where the waterfall problem does happen. What I do, and I don't know what other people do, and I don't want to do this, but I do this, is I give the client some work to do. And it's usually like information requests. And you know what? While they're supposed to work on it, but the truth is, in parallel, I'm doing their work for them. It's not a great process. I hate doing that because I'm doing extra work. But if I wait for the client, what happens is often they send me stuff that is barely usable. So sometimes I have to, this is writing I'm talking about, that I have to like write for them and insert their ideas and thoughts into it, The reason I do that is because my projects are deadline specific. They're set by the federal government, these deadlines. So I don't have any, I have to find ways to work faster. I don't like it, but one of the things that, oh God, I forgot already. All right, one of the things I learned, I was taught this. I was taught this by a consulting firm, McAllister and Quinn. When they work with their clients, they have weekly Zoom calls with them, weekly, through the entire project, weekly. And I used to complain and bitch and moan, but I'm telling you, those weekly meetings really did something. Because creative changes. As you work together, you get new insights, new thoughts, new ideas, and it is a pain because they might say, oh, we want to redo this completely. And that's where you go back to the contract, you add more money. So regular communication is so important. I can't stress it enough. The other thing, a little tip, I know this is for beginners. Seasoned creatives know this already. When you get work, you get the brief, whatever it is, and you get the assets, you get the assets in your email. Within 24 hours, you need to, don't send an email saying, I got the assets, thank you. No, you revisit the email, you download the assets, and you look at each one by one. I can't stress this enough because there's always a problem in the brief. There's always assets that are corrupted. And if you open the work if you open the work 3 weeks down the road and it's due in 4 days, you're really screwed. So most people do that. You really be mindful of the brief because the contract and then the brief are the anchor for the rest of the project.
Did you learn that from personal experience, or were you able to learn from colleagues?
All right, I want 2 stories. One, I got all these assets and I ignored the email. I said, oh yeah, great, I'm working on it as we speak. 3 weeks later, I opened it to work on it and all the files were corrupted. And I was so embarrassed and mortified to have to ask for the assets again, because clearly I didn't do anything for 3 weeks. So I was mortified. The brief thing, I learned that I worked with an agency for 1.5 years. It was the best gig of my life. And I worked with these really good project managers who actually were like very skilled. And what I learned was I'd read the brief and I'd say, I don't really want to write it that way. It doesn't make sense. So I would always question the brief and push back on the brief on how I thought it should be done. Like I was adding to the brief. And very often, if I had a good manager, and it was almost always a woman, she'd always say yes. And I had the best work of my career working with good managers and improving the brief. Yeah.
They just said good project managers is an oxymoron. So We're not gonna have a chat left because I'm gonna ban them all. That's okay.
Well,
That's
it's
right.
funny. I thought somebody in the series was talking about managers. The technologist from Reddit, who was the first speaker on this series, talked about managers and said that what managers do is they communicate what he's doing to people he doesn't want to explain it to. And that's what managers do. They explain things to the client in a way the client understands, so you don't have to like beat your head against the wall. And you talk to the manager. Now, bad managers basically say, no, this is how it is. No, it has to be this way. No, 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 no. And they do that, they create a wall. And the wall managers they're awful. And I don't usually stay with wall managers for very long. But I will say I did have a wall manager that I didn't respect. And I kept working with her. And I learned that she's not a wall. She's just very strict. And she started like rewarding me by complimenting my work and giving me more work. And I realized she wasn't a wall. She was just a tough manager.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk. We've talked about working with project managers a little bit. We talked about our contract that we kind of get set up at the beginning. What kind of pragmatic tips do you have for communicating with your clients? You talked about having that weekly, and I assume that you mean weekly communication is that weekly, either as much as you can person-to-person communication or, video conference, that like the asynchronous communication isn't what you're looking for because you want those natural conversations to flow during those meetings, correct?
Yeah, actually, asynchronous communication like email is good for sending assets, sending certain things. Basically, I used to do teleconferences on the phone. I don't work locally that much anymore. I'm from Philly, and I did avoid the, here, why don't you like haul yourself out, put on like a monkey suit and like sit for an hour. And they would always do this. They'd always be like, oh, let me give you the stuff. And you know what they do? They pull out a file and they start like copying it. And they'd hand me like a stack of paper. And I'm like, I can't. So they need to just email me that stuff, that stack of paper. The Zoom calls are basically, I set the timeline. I control the timeline in my work there. And what happens is every meeting, there's like a milestone. And in a way, it's like a sprint, except very much more casual, and just kind of revisit the timeline. And then when I get stuck, I use those communications also to ask them questions that they'll never answer on email because they're too sophisticated. They're too esoteric. They're undecided, and just sort of do that. I honestly, I'm very good with people. That's one of my skills. So I do understand personalities and kind of work where people are at. And some managers, I don't meet with them at all. We just talk by email because they're so on the ball,
Can you talk a little bit about change management?
Oh, wait, excuse me.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a cold. What is change management? I've never heard of it.
Oh, yeah. Just so if there's just a change in the project, like so they want a new asset or a different asset, like how do you manage change?
I think it's different for programmers. I think for writers and designers, a lot of the change, we suck it up. I was in the Contently platform. I was being paid very well, very, very well by a client that was doing it was like a major. I think it was like an Aetna brand, and they were redoing this app, all the stuff in this app, and they started refactoring the content, and this happens a lot with websites. They're refactoring it, and they just had like the managers were I didn't have meetings with them. They had meetings with themselves, and they would tell me. And one time they said, okay, well, we're refactoring all of this. And then I had to rewrite a lot of content. And one of the things I learned about that was it's important to have good workflows of, you have Git, with programming. With writing, there isn't as much of writing control, version control, but that kind of worked for me. And I didn't change the price. With another client, she liked my work. So you know what she did? She just said, well, can you do this extra thing, do this extra thing, do this extra thing every freaking month? And finally I said to her, listen, you're having me do all this stuff. I agreed to this fixed price per content piece. I'm going to charge you hourly. And I charged her hourly. And the truth was the project failed because she was very controlling and she kept asking for more and more. So this is where money doesn't matter. She was willing to pay me more and more money, but to control me more and more. She wanted to control me to the point where she wanted to read my emails to other people. And I'm okay with CCing, but you're not reading my emails. So obviously pay is not everything. So it really varies. And that's why there's clients from hell, because there's a variety of managers too.
Yeah,
so speaking of client from hell, we have a question from Trist talking about when a client is acting up, how long before you drop them? Or I think that a more beneficial conversation might be, how do you manage those conflicts so that, if you have a slight infraction, how do you manage that versus a major infraction like the privacy invasion?
Yeah, and by the way, before I fired this client or terminated, I terminated gently. I in my contract I have a termination clause. Just like in a contract for a landlord, like a lease, you always have a termination clause. And shoot for a 7 to 10 day termination clause. I had monthly. So I terminate a longtime client through saying, look, my world is changing. I have new directions. I have new things to do. I'm giving you 30 days notice. And I do that. And that's why you clean up the loose ends and get the invoices paid that of work fulfilled. When you're in a tire fire, which happens a lot, there is this how do I extract myself with dignity? Sometimes the termination clause, that's why I say keep it, don't make it a month, make it 7 days. There have been times where, God, it varies. I always agonize. Whenever a termination, I always agonize. And I cry a little and I agonize. And I try to, what's the best way to break up with this client? And if they're really violating me, I say, this doesn't work for me. And it's not in the contract. I think you need somebody else. And don't refer a bad client to someone else. It's just rude, and it's happened. People have done it to me. It's bad form. You just get out and let them go at the right time. If you're really in a bad spot where you actually can't do the work, you're not qualified for it, then you just have to. I sometimes in freelance, it's better to just own up fast and apologize, and also own up fast and apologize, even if it's not your fault. Sometimes the fastest way to get out is to say, look, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I can't, this project's beyond my scope. I don't think I've ever returned a deposit. The rule is you should never return a deposit. But I have left money on, in the fuck you pay me thing. I have left money on the table, but that was I had to get out. And the whole thing about reputation, I don't get Google reviews. I am not on Yelp. So I've made enemies. But you know what? They forget I exist in 2 weeks. I am a blip. They might be screaming and yelling one day, but 2 weeks later they've already forgotten my name. So try to keep in perspective.
All right. Well, I think that is a great thing to end on, keeping everything in perspective. So Caroline, I appreciate that you coming and talking. I think that we got through all of the questions here.
I love
Ron,
how
do you
it
have
turned
anything
from
left to say?
yeah. I just love that it turned from a presentation with slides to like improv a comedy sketch, and then in the end, it almost started sounding like dating advice as well about breakups. Chat loved it.
Yeah, and I hope you guys keep doing this. This is I'm very lonely in my life, work wise, and it's good to have this here. And I love you guys. I loved you before I even knew you as people. Reddit has really changed my life.
Wonderful. I think it's changed a lot of lives for the better.
Strager never forgets his enemies, so watch out.
Are you naming names, Strager? Are you pointing fingers? Well, Carolyn, where can we find you on the World Wide Web?
This is hard because I'm mostly anonymous online. Like I'm on Reddit, I'm on Discord, but I'm all anonymous. Just email me. Email my business account because it's less cluttered than my personal account. It's my first name, Caroline, at Fuel Copy, FUEL copy, one word.com. You can also just Google me. There's another Caroline Leopold in the world, and she's like 20 years younger, and very like. And you might mix her up with me, but I'm the one who's kind of older and crustier. She's like youthful and doing incredible things. So, yeah.
As in, you're the wiser one.
I wish.
All right, folks. Especially if you want to see those slides, I still want to see the full story from that "F you pay me" first slide. So make sure you email Carolyn.
Let me tell chat this. When I say please email me, I talk to strangers on Reddit all the time. I've made friends on Reddit. So I'm not, you emailing me is like a friend thing. Like I consider you in the family. So, and if you're like, if there's a spammer in the mix, that's okay. We can, that's part of the core of Reddit,
Straga is pointing at you in the chat, calling you an enemy. Just right after you said we're all friends here.
Well, so as we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that we have another session next Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That is December 20th, 2021. And we'll have correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm kind of doing this off the cuff. We have 2 speakers for that one, correct?
Absolutely right.
Wonderful.
First one is going to be from Marko Marinkovic. He calls himself an independent researcher and semantic web enthusiast. So I'm keen for that. He's going to be talking about alternative web workflows. And the second one is from Vikram Ingleshwar. And I don't want to pick favorites. I've honestly, like every talk from Lucas Smith's first ones, I've been interested in, and like I've been really looking forward to. But one thing that amazed me about this one, it's titled "How Do I Manage My Personal and Family Life Wellbeing for Maximum Productivity?" And what Vikram did is he's put personal well-being into an agile workflow. And that just made us chuckle. The fact that you can the merging of personal well-being and developer workflows was hilarious to see. So those 2 are up next week, same time. Lightning talk, full-length talk, full schedule is at the link below. Stick around in chat if you have more questions for Caroline, and make sure you email her for more slides or just ask any follow-up questions. We are Bebo. I am Ron. Thank you for tuning in to Reddit Web Devign Talks.
We are Bebo.
We are Bebo. We are all Bebo. Enjoy. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you.
Bye.